Hello guys, my name is Nibiri, and in this video I wanted to talk a little bit about how to approach different types of hardstyle leads. I've been seeing lots of videos lately where people just do stuff without really explaining what they're doing and why they're doing it. And that's why I wanted to make a video covering how I'm thinking when I'm making different types of leads. So the first thing I'll be covering is a little bit of my mindset before we start off with making leads. And basically the way that I got into making leads was talking to myself, how do I want the lead to sound? Do I want it a little bit more screamy, a little bit more squarey, more euphoric, more raw? And yeah, we're gonna get a little bit more in depth with that, and we'll end it up with making a lead with all that newfound knowledge. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do a little bit of a test with reference tracks. And we're gonna listen to how the top lead sounds in these reference tracks, and we're gonna use a little bit of a checklist for that. So the first thing you want to do is you want to figure out what type of waveform is dominantly used in the top lead of the lead sound. Then you want to listen to how it's distorted. Is it really distorted, or if it's just a little bit, and if the pitch of the notes are really moving. If it's really moving, then there's a lot of LFO that's being used inside of the VST while making the track. So let's just start off with the most easy one that I have over here. So this first one is the easiest of the 5 that I have, and it's really noticeable, just a square waveform for the top lead. The top lead is just a real pure sounding square, and it's not too detuned, or not too distorted, sorry, and not too LFO'd as well. It sounds quite static, but it's not too static. So if you want to make a top lead like this, start off with a square, of course, and then try to not go too wild with the LFO and the distortion. So up to the next one, just work down the checklist, and we're gonna see if you get the right thing. So this one, it's a lot more saw than the other one. It's not entirely a saw lead. There's a little bit something in between the saw and the back leads that are behind it. So I'd say maybe a tri-saw, maybe something with a little bit of a square, something in between of it. So when you're gonna make this type of lead, set yourself up with a square, set yourself up with a saw, sorry. And then maybe introduce a sine layer somewhere in one of the oscillators of that top lead, and try to get a more unique feeling to that saw lead. So this one is dominantly just saw. It's a track of mine, and I just know it's saw, but it's a lot of screamy. It's just a really screamy top lead. It has lots of LFO, lots of distortion, and just moves a lot. So if you thought for yourself, this is a saw lead, great job. Then this next one, halfway during the drop, there's something special happening. And if you kind of get the idea that we're going for right now, you're really gonna notice what waveform is which one. So if you heard this correctly, you'd hear that it starts off with something saw, quite moving, And then halfway during the drop, there's another layer added to it, harmony. And that harmony is entirely different waveform. That harmony is a square waveform. And that square waveform plays different notes and just complements the top lead correctly and makes the whole lead a little bit more unique. So this final one is just a really moving type of saw lead. So it's sound like a little bit more narrow with something like a bandpass and a lot of distortion, but the LFO just really makes it a really moving type of top lead. So I hope you've learned something from this little test, and right now we're gonna make a lead and we're gonna try to use this knowledge of how the top leads sound to make a correct sounding lead. So after this little melody session, I came up with this. It's a little bit more standard hardstyle lead, going to a little bit more raw feeling with a drive in the melody. You can take a listen first. So what I'm gonna do first, before I'm starting anything, is I want to imagine what type of lead I want. And I'm thinking it's gonna be more like a soft type of top lead, and probably with a lot of LFO and a lot of pitch slides to make the melody a bit more interesting. And I hope with the notes that I cut apart, like the 4 quick notes, maybe making some filter movements over there so the top lead really moves in these short bits. I like using silent 1. You can choose whatever you want as long as you have some filtering options and distortion inside of the plugin. Then you can be set just to make any type of hardstyle lead. Before I start doing anything, I'm just gonna lift up this little amp envelope A just a tiny bit. This removes the click at the end of each note and it just makes it sound a little bit smoother. Maybe it might fuck up the distortion in the end, but we'll see when that happens. So what I've did right now is I've chosen a bandpass filter. The bandpass filter cuts off the high frequencies and then I apply distortion. The distortion then gives the whole lead new high frequencies. So you can really get a distorted top lead, but it will still sound crisp because of the distortion, giving it some proper good high end. So right now I've just been looking with that filter to make the distortion sound correct. It's just a matter of playing a little bit with the resonance. Sometimes I keep the resonance down and then you get a more wide bandpass, but if you put the resonance up a little bit, it will make the bandpass a lot more tight and it will just sound a lot more aggressive and more screamy. And I think that's where I want to go with this lead. Also, a thing I'm paying attention to is that the top lead sounds powerful through all notes. I noticed a little bit that with the resonance too high in some of the higher notes of the melody, it just kind of lost power and sounded awkward. So that's why I'm trying to pull down the cutoff a little bit, give it some more warmth, try to keep the lead powerful in the entirety of the melody. Now the second LFO really is there to make the kind of static sound that we created with LFO1 move even a tiny bit more. And I'm using just smaller amounts than LFO1 just to make it just vibrate a little bit and just make the lead sound move a lot more. So right now it sounded like a solid top lead. It sounds powerful, but it doesn't sound too interesting yet. So I'm gonna try to introduce just one extra oscillator, keeping that on one voice as well, and see what that does to the entire top lead. You'll see me moving the phase knob a lot, and this phase knob just plays with the phase of the second oscillator. When you try that, sometimes the waveform of the second oscillator is fitting a little bit better into the waveform that you first chose. So maybe this is gonna get somewhere, maybe not, we'll see. This sine waveform just really gave it a more bright side to this lead, and I like that, but I tried to cut that down a little bit again with the cutoff and making the LFO move a lot more, so it doesn't sound so bright anymore. You know, we're making hardstyle, so we want some little bit more aggressive sounds to carry our tracks. So right now I just EQ'd it, and what I did is just some simple low cut and a little bit of a high boost. Sometimes with hypersaws, when you play around with the resonance, you already get this high shelf kind of feeling going on. Then you don't need to boost as much in the highs, but with this top lead, it sounds really much of the sounds coming from the mids, and I just want a little bit more brightness in there. Also pay attention that you never cut too much of this mid section away, because this, especially the top lead, is just going to carry the entire track. So you don't want that mid part to be just to be lacking. You need to have a solid mid part to carry the rest of the tracks and the rest of the layers of your lead. Because as you'll see in a bit, a lot of my layers are in the higher frequency spectrum. So you of course need something to fill up a little bit more in the mids to have a full sounding lead. Yeah, I think I really like this type of lead, and what I'm gonna do right now is I'm just gonna see if I can put some slide notes in here, or well, notes pitching down. I'm not sure which ones I want to choose yet, but we'll see where we're going. You don't only need to choose notes to pitch down. Sometimes it's fun to have a note have some more aggressive movement from octave lower to up. I like doing that at least. So I think I'm done over here right now, and a little bit you can probably hear when the pitch is down all the way, you hear the notes stretching out a little bit. That's that release that I was talking about in the beginning. So I'm gonna see if with moving this down a little bit, if we can kind of create a smoother exit for each note that's pitched down. I think that sounds a little bit smoother. If you still get annoyed by the amount that your the notes have released when you pitch it down, you can of course still fade out the volume of the layer that's creating the problem in your opinion. So I think we're actually done with that first layer right now. That top lead just sounds strong, it sounds moving, and it I think it was ready to just carry more layers. And what I try to do, or what I tend to do, is I just work for backsaw, hypersaw layers. So I'm gonna start with a lower one first, and then I do some with some octaves up, and this will kind of spread the lead out a lot more in the frequency spectrum. Instead of having the solid mids that we have right now, we're gonna slowly introduce more highs while keeping the mids down a tiny bit. Another important part is that I'm just gonna copy the movement of the top lead with the pitch envelope or automation, so it has the same over all the layers. So these first two oscillators, in my opinion, are very important, because these two oscillators are in the same frequency part as the top lead. You kind of want them to complement that top lead pretty well. And since we have quite a moving and dirty top lead over here, you can hear that by the amount of LFO, I mean. I think a lot of detune will work with that. Not too much, but that's why I've been kind of going crazy with this one. Maybe I'm gonna turn it down a little bit and maybe turn this one up a little bit, so we can get a really detuned feeling for that mid section. Another thing you probably saw me doing is I'm not entirely copying the same settings in the envelope for the pitch, but I am paying attention that this one's pointing up slightly, so I'm gonna slide up pitch with each note. I'm doing the same over here, because otherwise you're just gonna get up note, up pitches and down pitches at the same time, and I think that doesn't sound good. Never tried it, honestly. To be fair, I've never tried it, so I think it won't sound good. So right now we have a solid saw, but it's just a plain, normal, boring saw. And we're gonna try to make this boring saw move a little bit more with LFO. Just to fit that movement of the top lead as well and make it more interesting in the entirety of the lead that we're going for. The trick with this LFO stuff is just maybe go a little bit too extreme and then tone it down. So you really get to hear the character that the LFO is adding, and then you turn it down a little bit so you can choose what amount you want that character to be inside of your lead. So we've sent this to a new mixer channel, and we're just gonna EQ this, and then it's almost gonna look the same as the top lead. We're just gonna see where the mid body is. We don't want to take too much away from that, and then maybe if needed we're gonna add some highs. So the thing I'm gonna test right now is if they actually sound well together, and I'm gonna do that by just putting them down and first putting up the top lead and listen how that sounds, and then slowly introduce it with the hypersaw lead. So right now it sounds really crisp, and it has some proper back layers behind the top lead. So after I've executed this, so after I execute the hypersaw layer, I'm just gonna put them both down, the top lead and the hypersaw layer, and we're just gonna check if they sound well together. I'm gonna do that by moving the top lead up first, and then slowly introducing that with the hypersaw layer. If you're doubting about how much the volume should come up from the back leads or even the top lead, what I tend to do is I try to look away from the screen, because when you look at the screen you're just gonna look at the faders and you're gonna think like, meh, it's like kind of the same line, it should be at the same line, it should be correct. And what you want to do, of course, it's music, you want to listen if it's correct and not watch if it's correct. So what this back lead has done is it just creates a little bit more stereo for the top lead to move in, and kind of gives it a little bit more space behind it. And now we're gonna add a higher hypersaw layer to create even more space for the top lead to carry. So what I'm doing while creating the higher hypersaw is I keep in mind how the other one looks, and this one looks, almost all of them are kind of around halfway, and this with the extra detuned one, it sounds quite detuned. So that really gives me space to, with a higher layer that I'm creating right now, to have some more detune. I tend to keep the detune low when the lower hypersaw layer is a bit lower as well. So this one has lots of detune. Then with the other one, I know that I can kind of go crazy and create a more detuned high end. Now I've kept the voices down a little bit, and that is because I wait a second, forgot to do this. I kept the voices down a little bit over here because they're going to be in the same frequency spectrum as these, kind of the mid section. And if you keep the voices down, there's a little bit less voices in that lower part, and I'm just gonna keep the voices on 8 on the higher ones, because the higher ones still have space for that amount of high saws. So I'm really trying to make all these saw layers that I'm putting in here kind of have the right detune, making them not fall out of tune, but they kind of complement each other in the right way. And what you've been hearing, hopefully, is that this second high oscillator that I have over here kind of was too much. So I turned that down a little bit, and then I noticed that it was better, but it still sounded off with the other one that was higher. So that's just some micro adjustments that I'm doing to make the whole lead sound in tune with each other. I'm turning up the resonance over here to kind of create that high shelf when the cutoff is entirely open. So it just creates a little bit more high end. So over here, I've been really looking for that stable point in this lead where it moves, but it doesn't move too much. And now I'm gonna check if they sound right all together. Again, just doing this by moving up the fader with the other ones set where we had them. I hope you're noticing how much life this second hypersaw layer creates behind this top lead. These two together sound alright, but they sound quite dim. They sound not quite enthusiastically, you could call it. And what this higher layer is just doing, it's just creating more energy, creates more hype behind the entire lead. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just moving them all into a bus. And with this bus, I'm just gonna maybe give it a little bit more high end, and I'm gonna put an OTT on top of there, just to really create a little bit more upfront and aggressive feeling to the top lead. Another reason why I like to use the ODT is when you put the depth all the way up, you really hear that snappy beginning sound at the beginning of your notes, and I just really like that feeling it gives to each note. And if you turn it down a little bit, it will get a little bit less aggressive, but you can really use that to create some good snap and really put the top lead in front of everything else. So for those of you who don't know what OTT is doing, it's a compressor, a multi-band compressor with some low, mid and high bands. And the right side is upward compression if I'm correct, and the left side is downward compression. And what that does is it takes a certain threshold, and when part of these bands get below that threshold in decibel, it's gonna put it up again. So I'm using that with the mid band the most to kind of create some more warmth for the entire lead, and then when I have the mids in this is sounding in the way that I want it to be, I'm just gonna move the highs a little bit up, trying to just create a balanced sound again. So I'm kind of purposefully moving it out of balance to then create balance again when adding the high. So with this playing around with the volume knobs, I'm trying to get a little bit more of a different type of feeling inside of the lead. The top lead's still up front, but I wanted to have some more warmth from that kind of mid layer with the hypersaws. If you're doubting if your top lead's still up front, when you have these three layers, you can just mute the top lead when it's playing, and you really, if you did it correctly, you really notice a gap happening where the top lead isn't playing anymore. So if you'd close your eyes and listen to this on headphones, you'd really notice that the top lead is really in the middle and the hypersaws are all around it, and it's just wrapped in hypersaws. I just don't want to go into the reptus, so I turned this one down a little bit. Now the top lead and the back part of that is done. When I move it into a track, maybe it's not turning out in the right ways, maybe it's not lying in the mix properly, then I could add some other layers. But for now, as we've basically, if we're gonna make a track with this, we've started with the leads, so for now they sound good. I'm just gonna keep this as a base and maybe add some more layers later on if I'd make this into a track. With this hypersaw layer, I'm just gonna again copy the pitch automation that we have on the main lead, because I want the entire lead to pitch where it's needed. I'm gonna put this one into the mixer channel already and turn this down a little bit. And we're just gonna create some bright hypersaws. I like using Serum for bright hypersaws, so what I'm gonna do, it's what a buddy of mine told me, is just move both of them to 16 voices and just put the detune in the right amount. Normally, I'd like to spread my detune out a little bit more, but I think I want to go for something a little bit more unique. So I'm trying to keep the detune down a little bit, and that creates a little bit less phasing, more clear sound. With phasing, I mean it just sounds a little bit more warm in the midsection. Now, of course, we can't let the chords go without an LFO. So we're adding an LFO on the fine tune. And what this does, it will make the entire pitch move again, just as we've done over here. And I like to use the sine LFO also because we've used it before over here, but it just works for top leads in my opinion, or chords in my opinion. So we turn this down so it doesn't move too much, and then we're gonna increase the rate so it starts moving faster. So right now, I like the way the chords move, and I'm just gonna low cut them. And these are going to be the warm layer for the chords. So probably we're gonna keep a lot of mids and add highs again. Again, we're just gonna check this with the top leads playing as well, and we're just gonna see if it sounds correctly. By seeing if it sounds correctly, I'm start paying attention to the amount of detune. If it doesn't sound out of tune, and if kind of the vibe of the top leads and the back leads behind it fit the vibe of the chord vibe I'm going for right now. So I think it sounds pretty neat. It needs more space behind the lead and more high chord layers, but it already sounds quite neat, quite full and quite powerful, and that's what we're going for. So this again is where that listening and thinking to yourself before you start doing something is coming into play again. I feel like I have a solid midsection for this lead, but it needs more high end, more. It just needs to fill up more in the highs, and I'm thinking about doing it in Serum or in Silent. I'm not sure yet, but I think I'll be creating quite a static layer for the chords, and hopefully that static layer will have not too much detune, so it really gives the whole lead and the whole chords behind it room to breathe. I'm gonna experiment a little bit with the release on this one. I think if we put it to the because this layer is going to be all the way in the back for the leads, it might work with some more release. I'm just gonna try it out. Try something funky. Taking that with the same automation as the other ones really didn't work. It will made a really weird movement when the notes were in the release part. So I'm just gonna keep them without any automation on the pitch. So I feel we're almost there, but I'm not entirely sure yet. So I'm just gonna turn everything down again, keep the volume low, and really try to listen detailed how I want where I want each layer to fit in the entire lead. Now I know that I have 5 layers that sound well. These settings sound good on the 3 leads, and these sound okay together. Might change this one, the last one, a little bit. But they do sound good together, and now we're just gonna turn them down and really give them their own volume, fader, and right place to really finish the lead. hope you noticed it, and I'm just gonna reset all the things that I've done. I really noticed how the final layer that I've created kind of made it sound too much mids, and it just made the whole lead sound kind of meh. So this is how it sounded before, with the oscillators down. So what I've done is I've pitched them up a little bit. It sounds okay, but not as bright as I wanted to. It's not as bright as I intended it to be. And now it sounds a lot better. As you notice, hopefully, when I turn off these leads, it just, like I said, what I wanted to create room in the highs for this lead. And this final layer, or the last layer I've created, just creates that room and gives the whole lead even more air to breathe. Now it sounds good, but I think I'm missing some warmth. It might be because I'm not standard using the headphones that I'm using right now. I'm just gonna check if it's the headphones that I'm used to, or if it's really not enough mids. So I've been quickly checking the balance of the leads, and what I noticed is that I didn't like the high end with the amount of mids that I had. So I played a little bit with the amount of low cut, and especially here in this chord layer, I moved it up a little bit, gave it a little bit more highs, and with the OTT, I kept everything in the same, even the mid, but I moved down the highs a tiny bit. So it now it sounds a little bit more balanced, and I could do that a little bit more easy when I heard it on my speakers instead of on the headphones. So right now we have the powerful sounding lead, and I like working without reverb, as you've seen, to really create a powerful sound before I make any mistakes. And when you have reverbs on your mistakes, they're gonna spread out the mistakes into eternity. So that's why I like to only put the reverb on when I'm sure that I don't have any mistakes in my lead. So right now, I'm just gonna put everything into reverb. So the bus that we have over here, I'm gonna send it over here. And I'm just gonna put it over there. It seems like quite much, but it's actually going to really create a nice tail for my reverb. The reverb settings, I already have them over here. You can copy this if you want, all the settings. And what this does, especially this almost 7 seconds, is it just gonna create a big tail for the reverb, and then with a compressor behind it, that compression is really gonna kick up and keep that reverb alive when the melody isn't playing. So I'm just gonna play a quick snippet of the Toplead with some reverb, and you're really gonna notice how this compression just keeps the entire reverb alive. You can really notice how when I turn off the compression, that the reverb just dies out real quick. So we're gonna keep that compression on there, and then I'm gonna add a limiter, and this limiter is gonna be sidechained by our Toplead, and I think I'm gonna route or sidechain the Toplead over there to have a clean waveform, to have it sidechained per note. So what I'm going for right now is I really wanted an interactive reverb that kicks up whenever the notes aren't playing. So the way I created that is just putting down the threshold quite a lot, and the knee as well. And it's all about release after that. If you put the release up too much, it's just not gonna be kicking up the reverb. And if you put it down too much, you're just gonna get reverb popping up out of nowhere. So I'm just gonna demonstrate that right now. And if you put that at the right amount, then you really notice how the notes, when the notes aren't playing, they're just gonna, the reverb is just gonna kick up before the next note comes. You really hear how that pumps, and it's just really nice. It gives an extra layer of drive and interesting sound to your melody. Plus, keeping the top lead in front is pretty important, especially when you want to have big rooms of reverb, as we do for Hardstyle. Now I'm gonna route these to another bus as well. I'm gonna send that to the reverb, so we get the entire layers in this one reverb. It's really a warm reverb, and I really like that for my leads. With the chords in the verb as well, you really hear how that reverb comes alive as well. I might add a little bit of a Valhalla room on here as well to kinda make it a little bit less kicking and more wet on each note. So let's see what happens when we do that. So with this, I'm gonna turn down the mix a lot and maybe move this up a tiny bit, so we kind of create this little space for the top lead to move in, the depth all the way up. And I'm just gonna play a little bit with these two, see if we can create this separate room for the top lead to be lying in, while the other reverb is just in the background. So this really just creates a tiny detail of that your notes are a little bit more wet, and that just sounds better in the entirety when a kick is playing, because the kick's entirely dry as well. You can really have a melody on top of it, and it will still sound wet, but not too wet when you have a reverb just echoing over all the notes. So that sounds pretty awesome already. And what I'm gonna do right now is just try the same for the chords, but now I'm gonna try to get a little bit of a longer tail so it really puts the chords in the back. I'm just gonna see what's gonna happen when I do that. So this is even creating some more warmth in the background of the top lead, so I really like that, and I'm just gonna keep it on there. Of course, the thing we can't forget is a good sub, so I'm just gonna add a good sub layer. added the sine to begin with to have a good sub feeling, and the saw waveform is just going to create some extra harmonics, and then we added a filter. So that filter, so the extra harmonics from the saw wave don't play on until the high end, so we cut them off a little bit. Now these aren't the root notes for the chords, so I gotta check these out first. So that's it actually. I really like the end result that we've got, and this is actually my entire thought process when I'm making leads from scratch. So I had this extra harmony layer, but I think I'm gonna make an extra video about that. How to add that harmony layer to create some even more unique feeling to your top lead. Yeah, I hope you've learned something from it. Thanks for watching, and on to the next one.